Chapter 100. Holding the profound spirit furnace in both hands, the palm-sized cauldron body instantly became thick. With a slight thought, two flames immediately rushed into the furnace body from the two hands and flew up in the middle of the profound spirit furnace. This was Xianxian's method of using the imperial tool, not simply the imperial fire. All the reactions of the profound spirit furnace made Xianxian feel a sense of ease. Even under the control of his spiritual awareness, where there was a grain of dust in the profound spirit furnace, seemed to be able to know clearly. For the first time, he used the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. Although it was only the first layer, Xianxian had a deeper understanding of the sacrificial refining and refining of the magic weapon. When he was on the immortal executioner stage, Xianxian just remembered all of these firmly. It was not until he began to cultivate that he discovered the mystery of it one by one. This was just a heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. When the spiritual power was sufficient and the cultivation base was sufficient, he could also use the Earth Fiend sacrificial formation secret art on these magic weapons, and then all the magic weapons could also be strengthened by the universe treasure raising secret art. Xianxian could already imagine that when all these things were complete, and he used the genuine Yin and Yang 5 elements secret art, how powerful his magic weapon would be. And the spiritual power of the Yin and Yang 5 elements secret art in Xianxian's body also seemed to have some changes because of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. In each attribute of spiritual power, there seems to be a combination of directional changes. Xianxian has a feeling that because of the cultivation of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art, every attribute of spiritual power in his body was divided into 36 tiny spiritual powers. These 36 tiny spiritual powers condensed together according to the position of the heavenly spirit, forming his own 10 kinds of Yin and Yang 5 element spirit power, a total of 360. After this combination of spiritual power, it was more solid and more stable. At the same time, this also means that every time he makes a move, whether it is attack or defense, or even alchemy refining, every time there will be a natural Yin and Yang 5 elements formation, every spiritual power, there will be a heavenly spirit array. The array in the array, just this subtle change, made Xianxian's attack and defense increase out of thin air. There were also some changes in his spiritual awareness. Originally, it was just a crazy strengthening, but now, he began to feel the subtle changes in the elemental spiritual energy in his body. That was how he could sense the heavenly dipper formation formed by the 36 strands of spirit energy. Xianxian had a premonition that as long as the 360 threads of spiritual power grew stronger, the spiritual power in his body would also grow stronger. His increasingly sensitive divine sense even discovered that among the 36 strands of spiritual power, there was a strand that was relatively thicker than the other strands of spiritual power. After pondering a little, Xianxian understood that it was because he had only cultivated to the first layer of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. The current Big Dipper formation was far from being a complete Big Dipper formation. But just the first level made Xianxian feel that under the same spiritual power situation, the attack power had increased by at least 30%. He really didn't know how powerful the Tiangang formation would be if it was complete. What also made people look forward to it was the Earth Fiend sacrificial formation secret art, which was almost the same as the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art. Would it allow his spiritual power to be divided again and gather the number of heavenly spirits and earthly fiends? Maybe when the time comes, it would be 10 Big Dipper and earthly fiend formations with a single blow, and it would make people crazy to think about it. The profound spirit furnace was an alchemy furnace. In the future, it would need a variety of Yin and Yang 5 elements attributes. Therefore, Xianxian used the 10 attributes of Yin and Yang 5 elements secret art for sacrificial refining, which was only good and not bad. However, in the next sacrificial refining of the sword sheath, Xianxian couldn't help but begin to be in a dilemma. Which one should be used to achieve the best effect? Before making a decision, Xianxian had to consider what the main weapon he would use in the future was. After all, the sword sheath was just a sword sheath. No matter how high the grade was, it was just a sword sheath. If he wanted to fully exert the power of the sword sheath, He needed to supplement it with a powerful flying sword. And what kind of flying sword would he use in the future? This question, Xianxian had only a vague concept before and did not pay much attention to it. But now it was different. Facing the problem of determining the direction of development in the future, Xianxian also needed to calm down and think about it carefully. Fortunately, this problem did not confuse Xianxian for a long time. Since he has chosen the Great Yin and Yang 5 Elements secret art, he could only choose to use the Heaven and Earth Yin and Yang 5 Elements secret art to refine the origin flying sword. Then, the sword sheath still needed to use the spiritual power of the Yin and Yang 5 Elements secret art for sacrificial refining. The grade of the sword sheath was much higher than that of the profound spirit furnace at the moment, and Xianxian's effort was also several times that of the profound spirit furnace. It took more than 2 months just to sacrificial refine the sword sheath. The first layer of the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art was also becoming more and more proficient, and the sword sheath was becoming more and more sharp. In his hand, it still looked like an immortal beheading blade, but from time to time, it flashed with a burst of sharpness, making people see that it was a peerless famous blade. It's just that in the eyes of Xianxian, he couldn't help but shake his head. A truly powerful magic treasure wouldn't show off its edge like this. This was something that could be seen from old Lord Taishang's item. What jade bottle, immortal binding rope, diamond chakram, banana fan, and so on, they all looked inconspicuous, but any one of them was also a rare good magic weapon in the heavens and the earth. The peerless famous weapons had been honed and baptized countless times before they could achieve the true brilliance and restraint. The magic weapon and people were actually the same. With Xianxian's current understanding, it was because he was still showing off his sharpness, so the magic weapon would also reflect his cultivation state. Perhaps, after the major competition, Xianxian should consider where to sharpen himself. Calculating the time, there were still a few days before he could go out. Xianxian simply took out the jade bottle of the Xiangyang Mountain Medicine Garden. Before, because Xianxian's cultivation was low, he only left a spiritual awareness imprint. However, the grade of this medicine garden was higher than that of the sword sheath, and Xianxian did not expect to succeed in sacrificial refining at this time. Taking out the medicine garden was just to be able to solve the thunder pomegranate matter as soon as possible. Planting the thunder pomegranate required extreme environments, but this was not the only requirement. The reason why countless predecessors did not successfully plant it was because there was a lot of effort in the treatment of the seeds. The thunder pomegranate was not planted in the land of thunder from the beginning, and although its seeds seemed to be full of spirit power, they were actually empty inside. The seeds that could survive must be planted in a place with abundant first-wood spirit power and absorb enough spirit power to be planted, otherwise it would be impossible to germinate and take root. Moreover, when absorbing spirit power, it could not be contaminated by other spirit power, so it would not grow easily. In the medicine garden, there were some first-wood plants, and the place where they grew happened to be full of first-wood spirit power. Xianxian carefully broke the thunder pomegranate with a wooden knife, and after placing all the pomegranate seeds one by one, he withdrew from the medicine garden. Now he could only wait for them to slowly absorb the spirit power. After doing this, Xianxian repaired himself and adjusted his whole body to the best state. Finally, it was time to go out of the seclusion. The second day after he went out was the day of the sect's major competition. Note, regarding the choice of the thunderwood attribute, everyone has their own advantages. Golden firewood, I chose the wood attribute, but it does not mean that it is completely correct. Please understand. 1. Life Book, 3 Lives Connection, in the division of 10 stems in the astronomical section, first wood belongs to the thunder wood. This is because thunder is blown out by yang qi, the first wood is yang, take the image as thunder. In the second month of the lunar calendar, thunder bursts, which can be used as a sign of the first wood flourishing in spring. 2. Thunder belongs to the Zhen hexagram in the Zhou 8 diagrams, and Zhen is the east. In the east of the 5 elements, it is the wood. The first hexagram of the Palace 8 diagrams of the 64 hexagram is that Zhen is thunder. Chapter 101. Coming out of the seclusion room, the moment he saw the sunlight again, Xianxian suddenly had an impulse to try. It seemed that the body's instinct was also very much looking forward to the sect competition that would be held tomorrow. The sect competition was carried out by realms. Generally speaking, it was very dangerous to watch the battle across realms. Even if there was a higher level of protection, it was still a very risky thing. Generally speaking, people of the same realm were watching the battle. Of course, it was also a competition of the same realm. The rules of the competition were to calculate the points according to the number of wins and losses in the same realm, and then rank the rankings. Those ranked at the front would be able to enjoy better treatment, while those ranked at the back would have to spend more sect contribution points to obtain such treatment. This kind of competition was also stimulating all the disciples to cultivate crazily. Of course, there were obvious advantages and bonus points for challenging above realms, but few people would do this. Generally speaking, the teachers did not recommend that disciples challenge above realms. Not to mention the danger, it would also seriously dampen their self-confidence, and the gains were not worth the losses. What Xianxian participated in was naturally the Qi refining realm competition. All the disciples in the Qi refining realm would fight today, challenge others or be challenged by others. The venue was, of course, in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa. Because of the performance of Xianxian and Gong Sunling on the celestial stairway, the palace master of the Chunyang Palace personally came to watch the Qi refining realm competition. This also made all the disciples excited. As long as they left a deep impression in front of the head of the palace, would they still have to worry about their future cultivation? As a disciple, Chu Heng appeared this time as the arbitrator and defender of the competition. At the same time, there were more than a dozen experts in the foundation stage, including Du Qian of the Law Enforcement Hall. Xianxian was not very interested in challenging the Qi refining disciples of the 9 Earth Mountain Villa and seizing their cultivation resources. The only one who could make him have the desire to learn from each other was Gong Sunling. As for Sun Haijing, he was the target of a life and death challenge, and their relationship had become enemies. Gong Sunling didn't waste these 3 months either. At least, when Xianxian first saw her, he knew that she must have broken through again within these 3 months and entered the realm of Qi training stage 7. Compared to Gong Sunling before she ascended the heaven stairway, the current Gong Sunling was more proactive and had more fighting spirit, as if she was ready to compete with everyone in the world. Because this fighting spirit brought about a change in his temperament, it made people's eyes light up. Originally, Gong Sunling was a rare beauty. Now, she had more confidence and initiative. For the past 3 months, she had been cultivating in closed-door meditation. This was the first time she showed her face. However, the moment she showed her face, she immediately attracted the attention of all the aura-refining disciples. Even Chu Heng stared at Gong Sunling's eyes, with an indescribable taste. In the past, Gong Sunling was kind, but not to everyone. Now, this temperament gave her a trace of an inviolable and otherworldly feeling. Although almost everyone's eyes were on Gong Sunling, no one dared to go up and say a word to Gong Sunling. A smile appeared on Xianxian's face as he greeted Gong Sunling from afar. Seeing that it was Xianxian, Gong Sunling immediately smiled at Xianxian. Just this slight smile, in the feeling of everyone, it was as if the sky suddenly cleared up. Any little discomfort in their hearts disappeared without a trace in this smile of Gong Sunling. With just a greeting from these two, the palace master of Chunyang Palace, who had already arrived at 9 Earth Mountain Villa but had yet to show himself, immediately noticed the abnormality between Xianxian and Gong Sunling. One could make people not dare to casually strike up a conversation, but a smile could make people feel as open as the sun. The other could maintain a normal state of mind no matter what. This was truly rare. It had to be known that right now, which disciple of 9 Earth Mountain Villa wasn't in fear and trepidation. They were afraid that their performance would be discovered by the palace master, so all the disciples were extremely reserved. Even many of the foundation establishment disciples in charge of arbitration and protection had the same thoughts. Apart from Xianxian and Gong Sunling, only 2 or 3 foundation establishment disciples could behave so calmly. It was not surprising that Gong Sunling had entered the 7th level of Qi refining. Her strength had increased and her mental state had also broken through. But for a third-level Qi refining outer sect disciple to have such a mental state, it was no wonder that she was able to reach the top of the heaven stairway twice and cripple 19 golden core masters. She was indeed extraordinary. The sect master had only appeared in front of the outer sect disciples once and hadn't even said a word, but everyone was already excited. Hearing about it was one thing, and seeing it was another. Sun Haijing stood quietly in the corner with an unfathomable smile on his face. He also knew from Chu Heng why the palace master of Chunyang Palace had appeared here. Watching Yang Chen and Gong Sunling greet each other from afar, Sun Haijing suddenly had a funny idea in his heart. If Yang Chen, whom the palace master had high hopes for, was killed during the sect competition, what kind of mood would they have at that time? Not only Chunyang Palace, all the sects allowed disciples to launch life and death challenges. This was the most direct way to solve a dispute openly, and no one would pursue it later. Of course, this was only in theory. Only the people involved knew whether or not they would be pursued. But at this point, what was there for Sun Haijing to be afraid of? Between being immediately killed by Yang Chen and the possibility of being pursued after killing Yang Chen and being unable to advance one's cultivation from then on, even an idiot would know what to choose. Chu Heng announced the start of the competition. In an instant, the martial field of 9 Earth Mountain Villa immediately boiled over. Many disciples began to challenge disciples of the same level according to their respective small realms. Very quickly, the martial field was filled with the shadows of blades and swords. Yang Chen didn't move, and neither did Gong Sunling. But in the corner, Sun Haijing leisurely challenged a disciple at the peak of Qi condensation. His appearance immediately caused many people to clamor. Sun Haijing was only a disciple at the 4th level of Qi condensation. How could he dare to challenge an expert at the peak of Qi condensation? Moreover, he was actually the publicly recognized #1 expert among the outer sect disciples. Challenging someone above one's level was allowed in the competition, and it also gave the highest score. But for the person being challenged, it wasn't a good thing. The strong bullying the weak wasn't honorable, and losing was even less worth it. Even if it was a challenge above one's level, it was usually a 3rd level challenging a 4th level, and a 4th level challenging a 5th level. Challenging someone above 5 levels was unprecedented. Junior Marshall Brothers' son, think carefully. The disciple being challenged was called Zhou Zai. He wasn't very old, only in his early 30s. From the time he started cultivating to the peak of Qi condensation, it had only been a short 15 to 16 years. He was only one step away from foundation establishment. In these few years, he absolutely dominated the outer sect disciples to become the #1 expert. He wouldn't be afraid of Sun Haijing's challenge and only lightly reminded him. Sun Haijing burst into laughter and opened his hand. A sword shadow flew out from his hand and circled around Sun Haijing's body. Chapter 102. Magic Weapon? The spectators couldn't believe their eyes. The sword shadow released by Sun Haijing's hand, the light it emitted, and the momentum it carried was clearly a magic weapon, flying sword. He was just a disciple in the Qi refinement stage. Where did he get the flying sword? How could he use it? A series of questions immediately appeared in everyone's mind. Yang Chen looked at this scene, and his brows deeply wrinkled. Looked like Sun Haijing's situation was very similar to a tyrannical speed training method that he knew of. This kind of training method could be found in the Sutras Pavilion of the 9 Earth Mountain Villa. However, the price of practicing this kind of training method was too high. Almost no one would choose this kind of training method. Almost no one didn't mean no one. Sun Haijing was like this. In just a few months, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had even surpassed the peak of the Qi refinement stage and was close to the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. Even the flying sword in his hand was obtained a few days ago when he ambushed and killed a loose cultivator who had just reached the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. Not everyone was like Yang Chen and read all the jade slips in the Sutras Pavilion. Almost 90% of the people didn't know what happened to Sun Haijing's abnormal situation. They only knew that Sun Haijing, a disciple in the 4th level of the Qi refinement stage, suddenly had the strength of the foundation establishment stage. How could they not be surprised? Chunyang Palace had already produced 2 genius disciples in the Stairway Gathering this year. Could it be that another one had quietly appeared? Was Chunyang Palace really bursting with popularity and gathering geniuses this year? The crowd's surprised and doubtful voices made Sun Haijing feel unusually satisfied. Everyone's disbelief and disbelief made Sun Haijing feel like he was bathing in the spring breeze. He felt like he was floating. After being humiliated by Yang Chen in front of so many disciples, the feeling of being disgraced was swept away. A huge sense of satisfaction filled Sun Haijing's body. Even the Imperial Censor's flying sword was a little more agile. Zhou Zai, who was opposite Sun Haijing, had a serious expression on his face. Even though his opponent had already revealed his flying sword, as a disciple at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm, he still had a fighting chance. The expression on Sun Haijing's face was too uncomfortable. Even though Zhou Zai knew that his chances of winning were not high, he would not give up immediately. Faced with the magic weapon, the flying sword, Zhou Zai took out his trump card, a talisman. It was also a sword, but its level was much lower. It was just a talisman sword. Even so, it still gave off a soul-stirring power. The sword, which had been refined for a long time, suddenly gave off a chilling sword chi. Zhou Zai had erupted with a powerful aura that refused to admit defeat due to Sun Haijing's sudden challenge. For a moment, it was on par with Sun Haijing's flying sword. You won't cry until you see the coffin. Sun Haijing sneered and took the initiative to attack. In his opinion, since he had revealed his magic weapon, the flying sword, his opponent should immediately admit defeat, bow down, and hand over the victory. Why would there be a need for a fight? Wouldn't this greatly reduce his sense of pride in winning? Facing Zhou Zai, who was ignorant of the current situation, Sun Haijing's first move was to kill. The flying sword went straight and stabbed at the center. Zhou Zai did not want to lose his reputation as a disciple at the peak of the Qi refining realm. He did not dodge, but controlled the talisman sword to meet the attack. Clang! An unusually clear and melodious sound was heard. The crowd seemed to hear an indescribable sound. The 2 lights flew to both sides and returned to their respective owners' hands. After Zhou Zai blocked the attack, he found that there seemed to be a little problem with the talisman sword in his hand. He looked down and saw a gap the size of a grain of rice on the blade. He had lost in the sword fight just now. After one move, the palace master of Chunyang Palace could not help but sigh. Although Sun Haijing's strength had improved, it was because he had practiced that kind of overbearing skill. Genius? Not qualified at all. He had thought that there would be an unexpected surprise, but now it seemed that it was just wishful thinking. The palace master shook his head and then glared at Chu Heng, the training tutor. How could a disciple in the Qi refining realm practice this kind of skill? Chu Heng, the training tutor, was very unqualified. This glare almost scared Chu Heng out of his wits. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. He lowered his head and did not even dare to breathe loudly. He almost knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Fortunately, the palace master only glared at him and did not say anything. He just closed his eyes again and continued to observe the situation in front of him with his divine sense. After all, Sun Haijing's strength had recently improved and he had just obtained the flying sword. Although he looked impressive on the surface, his sword-riding skills were really inferior. Compared with Zhou Zai, who had been immersed in it for a long time, he was not a level lower. However, Sun Haijing had no other skills. He could only rely on the fact that the flying sword in his hand was made of better materials than Zhou Zai's talisman sword. Every time, he would attack the enemy's vital points and perish together, forcing Zhou Zai to compete with him in terms of swords. After a few times, the talisman sword in Zhou Zai's hand was already badly damaged. If he continued to fight, the talisman sword would be destroyed. After hesitating again and again, Zhou Zai finally gave up. He was about to build his foundation and this talisman sword had been with him for many years. After building his foundation, he would be able to turn it into a magic weapon, the flying sword. Now that it was destroyed, it was really not worth it. He found an opportunity to jump out of the ring and cupped his hands at Sun Haijing. Junior brother Sun's flying sword is amazing. I admit defeat. With that, he turned around and left without looking back. Sun Haijing had won a round. Hearing the waves of envious exclamations coming from below the ring, he was unusually satisfied. After feeling smug for a long time, he finally turned to Yang Chen and called out, "Junior brother Yang, you won't be a coward in my life or death challenge, right? Junior brother Yang, do you dare to accept the challenge?" Once these words were spoken, another wave of exclamations immediately rang out. According to the rules of the sect's internal competition, in a life or death challenge, those with lower cultivation levels did not have to accept the challenge. If Yang Chen did not accept the challenge, Sun Haijing would not have the opportunity to cause trouble for Yang Chen. His question was obviously to force Yang Chen to accept the challenge. However, Yang Chen laughed and stepped into the martial arts arena. His actions also attracted a wave of astonished gazes. Sun Haijing had clearly demonstrated the strength of an early-stage foundation-building cultivator. How could Yang Chen, a disciple of the third layer of Qi training, be so unwise as to go up and die? Standing in front of Sun Haijing, Yang Chen looked at Sun Haijing, whose eyes were already shining with a complacent light. He suddenly asked, "Senior brother Sun, when you found this technique, did you look at the explanatory jade slip on the side? Do you know that if you practice this technique, you definitely won't live more than half a year?" As soon as Yang Chen said this, Sun Haijing's expression immediately changed. Chapter 103. The fact that Yang Chen had read the jade slips for half a year in the scripture pavilion was no secret at all in the Nine Earth Villa. Yang Chen knew Sun Haijing's cultivation method, which Sun Haijing was not surprised at all. However, the annotation jade slip next to him, Sun Haijing had never seen it before. He didn't even know that there was a piece of annotation jade slip. This was also the reason why his expression changed greatly. At this moment, he suddenly felt a fear that came from the bottom of his heart. His master, who usually supported him absolutely, became the source of his fear at this moment. This method had such a huge flaw, but why didn't Chu Heng tell him? Sun Haijing could think of a reason for this, but he absolutely didn't want it to be this reason. Trapped in a dilemma, Sun Haijing stood where he was in a daze. Although the words of the two were low, they could not be hidden from the ears of the people watching the battle. Hearing that Yang Chen only used a sentence to make Sun Haijing lose his composure, it seemed that everyone understood the truth of the matter. For some unknown reason, Sun Haijing actually cultivated an overbearing method that was quick but at the cost of his life. He forcefully increased his strength and was able to defeat Zhou Zai. However, he didn't know the fatal flaw of this method, which was why he was in trouble now. No one would suspect that Yang Chen and Sun Haijing didn't get along. The two of them had been in conflict ever since Yang Chen wanted to join Chunyang Palace. At that time, Sun Haijing was beaten by Yang Chen until he had to lie in bed for a long time to recover. Now, it was very normal for Sun Haijing to issue a life and death challenge to Yang Chen. However, after clearly seeing Sun Haijing defeat Zhou Zai, who was at the peak of Qi refinement, Yang Chen still agreed to the life and death challenge. This was very puzzling. Could it be that Yang Chen now had the strength to fight against experts at the peak of Qi refinement or even the early stage of foundation establishment? Sun Haijing, who was in a daze, finally woke up from his trance. Facing Yang Chen, his face suddenly turned ferocious. "You want to rely on a lie to make me lose my fighting spirit? You're still not good enough." As soon as he shouted these words, he immediately recovered his raging fighting spirit. His eyes were bloodshot, and he released 2 rays of terrifying red light, as if he wanted to devour someone. "Whether it's true or not doesn't matter to you anymore." Yang Chen shook his head slightly, his face full of regret. For Sun Haijing, who was about to die, it did not matter whether Yang Chen's words were true or false. Humph, deliberately mystifying things. However, Sun Haijing didn't think so. When he heard Yang Chen's words just now, he was indeed depressed for a while, but he soon realized that perhaps this was Yang Chen's psychological attack to make him lose his fighting spirit. After understanding this, Sun Haijing also became angry, but at the same time, he also relaxed. Regardless of whether Yang Chen's words were true or false, for Sun Haijing, what was done could not be undone. Even if he wanted to turn back, it was impossible. The only way to determine whether it was true or false was after he killed Yang Chen in the life and death challenge. He would go to the scripture pavilion to see if there really was such an annotated jade slip, and if there was such a description on the jade slip. All of these prerequisites, even if it wasn't for the purpose of determining whether it was true or false, Sun Haijing first had to survive. This battle was the most important matter at hand. Junior Yang, didn't you say you wanted to use countless talismans to smash me to death? At Sun Haijing's side, the sword light of the flying sword rose up again, circling around Sun Haijing. At the same time, it added a layer of brilliance to Sun Haijing's body. It also seemed to give him unlimited confidence. With lofty sentiments, he asked Yang Chen, I want to see, Junior Yang, what kind of talismans do you plan to use to deal with my flying sword? There really aren't many talismans to deal with your flying sword. Hearing Sun Haijing's question, Yang Chen smiled. I didn't buy many talismans when I went out. Senior Sun might be disappointed. Since Junior Yang has agreed to the life and death challenge, then don't blame me for being heartless. Sun Haijing's face once again revealed a sinister smile, especially when he heard that Yang Chen didn't have any talismans. It was mixed with a sinister smile. To be able to die by the magic weapon flying sword is also Junior Yang's good fortune. To die by a magic weapon, I don't have that kind of fortune. Yang Chen smiled again. Such a good thing, it's better to leave it to Senior Yang. Following Yang Chen's words, a scabbard slowly rose beside Yang Chen, hovering in front of Yang Chen. It was simple and unadorned, but it didn't have that dazzling light. Since Senior Yang has a flying sword, I happen to have a scabbard. I wonder if it can hold Senior Yang's flying sword? Facing the astonished Sun Haijing, Yang Chen said unhurriedly. As soon as the scabbard appeared, everyone around felt a different feeling. Sun Haijing, who was in the field, naturally felt the silent pressure carried by the scabbard, and his face also became solemn. However, the palace master of Chunyang Palace, who was observing with his divine sense from behind, had a serious expression. He opened his eyes and said, "Good stuff." This sentence directly caused a silent flame to appear in the eyes of Chu Heng, who was serving beside him. How can there be such a coincidence? I have a flying sword, and you have a scabbard? You want to hold my flying sword? Dream on. Sun Haijing also noticed that Yang Chen's scabbard was a good thing. However, no matter how good it was just a scabbard. He had never heard of any master who would use a scabbard as a weapon, let alone refining a scabbard into a magic weapon. In this day and age, those who had a flying sword, which flying sword was not kept in their dantian and tempered all the time. Why would they need a scabbard? Whether it's a dream or not, Senior Yang will know after you try it. Yang Chen no longer argued with Sun Haijing, but just said this faintly. You're courting death. Sun Haijing was furious. New hatred and old hatred surged in his heart in an instant. The flying sword around him suddenly turned into a ray of light and flew toward Yang Chen's face. Without a sound, only a rainbow shadow was left. It was extremely fast. However, what made everyone dumbfounded was that when the rainbow shadow of the flying sword flew not far from Yang Chen, the scabbard hanging in front of Yang Chen suddenly became abnormally huge. It opened up a big hole and directly swallowed the flying sword in one gulp like a hungry beast. No matter how much Sun Haijing tried to control the flying sword disappeared into the scabbard and didn't react at all. It was as if the connection between Sun Haijing and the flying sword had been directly cut off, causing Sun Haijing to suddenly feel a sense of despair. Impossible! Impossible! Sun Haijing, who had lost his flying sword, was like a madman. He shouted and shouted, "You are just a small disciple at the 3rd level of Qi training. How can you control a magic weapon? How can you take my flying sword?" Chapter 104. Others only saw Yang Chen's scabbard flash and Sun Haijing's flying sword disappear, but they didn't expect that the flying sword had been seized by Yang Chen. Hearing Sun Haijing's shout, everyone was shocked. What kind of cultivation was it to seize a flying sword that was in use? Although most disciples in the Qi refinement stage didn't have the opportunity to come into contact with magic weapons, it didn't mean that disciples in the Qi refinement stage didn't have magic weapons. At least Xianxian knew that even in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa, there were a few disciples in the peak of the Qi refinement stage who had a magic weapon flying sword. He wasn't the only genius. These people had also refined magic weapons and flying sword. Some could even use a flying sword. Naturally, they knew how terrifying the ability to seize a flying sword in use was. Senior brother's son, you're out of luck. My scabbard can contain a flying sword that hasn't been sacrificially refined. Xianxian's face was filled with a kind of unkind smile after taking a big advantage. He said cheerfully, I was worried that I didn't have a chance to find a flying sword, and senior brother's son delivered it to my door. Thank you. Sun Haijing was almost angered by Xianxian's mocking tone and directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Not only did he seize other people's magic weapons, but he also ridiculed them. No one could stand Xianxian's tone. However, Xianxian's words made many people feel at ease. That scabbard could only contain a flying sword that hadn't been sacrificially refined. This also meant that Xianxian wouldn't have the ability to seize other people's magic weapons in the future. Sometimes, having an ability that made others afraid was the source of trouble. Since Xianxian was only used to deal with Sun Haijing, others naturally didn't have to worry too much. The scene just now even made the Lord of Chunyang Palace open his eyes in shock. After hearing what Xianxian said, he nodded slightly and closed his eyes again. Xianxian's explanation was more reasonable. He had not refined it and had only marked it with his divine sense. Even without the scabbard, people with high cultivation could easily take it. It was normal for Xianxian to need the help of the scabbard because his cultivation was not high enough. Sun Haijing was no longer as arrogant as before. His face was filled with horror, and even his tone seemed to have softened. Junior brother Yang, you and I don't have any enmity that can't be resolved. Junior brother, don't be so ruthless, okay? As they spoke, the two of them stopped fighting and each stood at one end of the arena. Sun Haijing's voice was filled with pleading. It seems that this life and death challenge was initiated by senior brother's son, right? Although Xianxian didn't make a move, his tone didn't mean to let Sun Haijing go. I remember that when I left Zhurong Mountain Villa, senior brother's son said that it was a pity that he didn't have the chance to challenge me. I never dare to forget it. When Xianxian said this, everyone looked at Sun Haijing's eyes, and it was different. Everyone knew that Xianxian was attacked by several killers as soon as he left Chunyang Palace. Although they didn't know what method Xianxian used to kill those killers, everyone understood that this was a premeditated collusion to harm his fellow disciples. Now that Xianxian said this, the biggest suspect naturally fell on Sun Haijing. Harming one's fellow disciples was a crime second only to deceiving one's master and destroying one's ancestors. Except for a few unscrupulous sects in the Daoism, no matter which sect, even most of the sects in the Daoism would not tolerate this kind of thing. Suddenly, Sun Haijing became the target of public criticism. If it weren't for the fact that he was now in the arena and the Lord of Chunyang Palace was watching the battle from behind, some people would have been agitated and jumped up to punish him. Even so, there were many people who scolded him. If he didn't leave a good impression of abhorrence of evil in front of the Lord of Chunyang Palace at this time, when would he? Chu Heng's heart almost jumped out of his chest. If Sun Haijing faced this kind of pressure and accidentally brought himself out, he wouldn't even have a chance to escape in front of the Lord of Chunyang Palace. At this moment, he didn't know how much he regretted it. If he had known this day would come, he wouldn't have kept Sun Haijing and spent a lot of effort to find a flying sword to give him courage. Sun Haijing also seemed to be aware of the atmosphere of being condemned by thousands of people. Knowing that he would die, he no longer had any scruples and laughed wildly. Ha! It was I who did it, so what? You are an executioner who has killed countless people. How dare you stand side by side with us diligent cultivators? I want to kill you. It's just a pity that those people didn't make a move, otherwise you would have been a ghost in the netherworld. Chu Heng's worried heart was finally put at ease when he admitted to taking all the responsibility. Beside the Lord of Chunyang Palace, he didn't dare to breathe heavily, but he also felt a burst of relaxation. However, he didn't see that under the closed eyelids of the Lord of Chunyang Palace, the two eyeballs turned in his direction and soon returned to normal. It's good that you admit it. Xianxian snorted coldly, if so, then die. The scabbard disappeared in the air, and Xianxian had already flown towards Sun Haijing. Still in the arena, the Lord of Chunyang Palace didn't speak, so naturally, others didn't dare to interfere easily. Seeing that Xianxian actually gave up his magic weapon and fought with Sun Haijing with his bare hands, everyone frowned and began to worry about Xianxian at the same time. The opponent had the cultivation of the early stage of foundation establishment. Wouldn't he be courting death if he went up like this? Since you want to die, I will help you. Sun Haijing was even more overjoyed. Xianxian, who was a thorn in his flesh, actually gave up the advantage of his magic weapon to compete with him in cultivation. Wasn't this the prey that came to him? At this moment, he had no chance to escape. He only hoped to die with Xianxian. Without thinking about it, he directly flew up and rushed toward Xianxian. The two figures were almost stuck together in an instant. Everyone's eyes widened, for fear of missing any moment. However, to everyone's disbelief, even with Sun Haijing's current speed, his punch still didn't hit Xianxian. Instead, his wrist was grabbed by Xianxian, and then he was easily swung up. After a few big circles in the air, Sun Haijing was heavily thrown to the ground by Xianxian with a bang. The sharp pain of the bones in his wrist being crushed and the dizziness of spinning in circles made him almost unable to resist. He could only see the ground getting closer and closer, and then he fell heavily. As soon as he raised his head, he saw a huge fist appear in front of him. Bang bang bang. The continuous sound was accompanied by the occasional cracking sound, ringing in everyone's ears. Xianxian's fists hit Sun Haijing's head one after another, and in a short while, Sun Haijing's head was smashed into a bloody gourd. Do you really think that I can't beat you without a magic weapon? Xianxian stopped smashing, pulled Sun Haijing's bloody head, and just twisted it. With a cracking sound, Sun Haijing's head was turned in a circle, still facing the original direction, but his vitality was immediately cut off. Chapter 105. As soon as Xianxian's spiritual power left Xianxian's body with the 5 elements positive yin-yang formation, it skyrocketed by 5 times under the effect of the 5 elements mutual promotion. Although his cultivation was only at the 3rd level of qi refining, his vigorous and pure spiritual power was stronger than those at the peak of qi refining. There were also 10 Big Dipper formations embedded in the 5 elements formation, so its power was even greater. Although Sun Haijing had the strength of the early stage of foundation establishment, under such continuous attacks, the protective formation on his body, which he had just practiced and was not yet proficient in, was broken in just a few blows. The following blow was even more complete. The rotten bloody head and the lifeless body all showed the fact to all the audience that Sun Haijing had been killed by Xianxian. Sun Haijing was killed by Xianxian. Sun Haijing, who had the strength of the early stage of foundation establishment and had the flying sword, was killed by Xianxian, an outer sect disciple at the 3rd level of qi refining. The top master of the outer sect, Zhou Zai, admitted defeat. Coupled with Sun Haijing's arrogance, everyone had already recognized that this guy had the strength of the early stage of foundation establishment. Just by looking at his flying sword, he forced Zhou Zai, who was at the peak of qi refining, to admit defeat. They could see the clues. In addition to the surprise, they were even more surprised that Sun Haijing had issued a life and death challenge to Xianxian. However, what was even more surprising was that no one would have thought that Xianxian, who had just reached the 3rd level of qi refining, would be able to beat Sun Haijing to death on the spot with his bare hands. Although Sun Haijing had admitted to the crime of hiring assassins to kill, such a strong contrast still made the outer sect disciples unable to accept it in a short time. Could it be that the top master of the outer sect was not at the peak of qi refining, but at the 3rd level of qi refining? A little interesting. The palace lord of Chunyang Palace, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly said. Then he just bent his finger and flicked it gently in the direction of Xianxian on the martial arts arena. The people in the martial arts practice field did not notice anything at all, but Xianxian suddenly felt a wave of vigilance. His body moved quickly, his arms crossed in front of him, and he directly took a defensive stance. At the same time, dozens of earth wall magic charms flew out of the cosmos sac. In the blink of an eye, dozens of thick earth walls rose in front of Xianxian. This talisman that could move without wind made everyone's eyes light up. However, the people around were very puzzled. Xianxian had already won. Why would he suddenly make such a move? Xianxian didn't have time to explain. He had just finished this series of actions when an extremely powerful force directly hit the wall that had just been raised. Boom, dozens of thick earth walls, in the face of this force, were as weak as paper. As soon as the destructive force and the earth wall came into contact, the earth wall turned into a cloud of flying dust. This was not all. After destroying all the earth walls, the remaining force accurately hit Xianxian's crossed arms. Xianxian's body was pushed by a huge force. His feet did not leave the ground, but his whole body was pushed straight at least a few feet away, leaving 2 straight marks on the martial arts arena under his feet. The tyrannical force not only hit Xianxian's body, but there was also such a small force directly from Xianxian's arm into Xianxian's body, and fiercely collided with the spiritual power in Xianxian's body. The invincible momentum seemed to completely smash Xianxian under one blow. As soon as he came into contact with the force, Xianxian felt that it was not good. The spiritual power in his body had already been transformed into yin and yang reverse and 5 elements, and he tried his best to resist the spiritual power that invaded his body. 2 arms, 1 yin and 1 yang, yin and yang reverse and 5 elements, like 2 huge stone mills, began to madly consume the invading spiritual power. The spiritual power of the 5 elements in Xianxian's body was all mobilized to resist. The people on the periphery only saw that after Xianxian was hit and retreated, a crystal blue suddenly appeared on his arm. This blue seemed to be alive, quickly rushing along Xianxian's arm to his shoulder, and it seemed that it would arrive soon. At this time, a red light suddenly appeared on Xianxian's body, and it spread to his arms and began to resist the spreading blue. Standing next to the Lord of Chunyang Palace, Chu Heng, of course, saw the action of the Lord of Chunyang Palace, overconfident. Xianxian actually wanted to rely on his own spiritual power to fight against the Lord of Chunyang Palace. Chu Heng could not help but give a cold snort and give such an evaluation. The Lord of Chunyang Palace obviously wanted to use this spiritual power to check the strength of Xianxian. Even with Chu Heng's current realm, he did not dare to say that he could take this blow from the Lord of Chunyang Palace. An outer sect disciple at the 3rd level of Qi, refining, dared to resist without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. It was really stupid. However, just as this cold snort rushed out of his throat, the situation of Xianxian on the martial arts field directly gave Chu Heng a heavy blow. The red light stopped an inch below Xianxian's shoulders. Although it retreated a little at the beginning, after retreating an inch below his shoulders, it stopped retreating and began to be in a stalemate with the blue light. How is it possible? Chu Heng almost suspected that there was a problem with his divine sense, but being next to the Lord of Chunyang Palace, he did not dare to leave without permission and personally go to the martial arts field to see what was going on. He could only make such a sound in his heart and concentrate more and more on exploring what was happening on the martial arts field. The red light and the blue light were in a stalemate for a moment and began to fight back. Slowly, the blue light was pressed back to the bottom bit by bit, and the speed was getting faster and faster. At first, it was just a slight shift, but soon it became a minute, and then an inch by inch. Under the watchful eyes of the public, the spreading blue was pressed to the place where Xianxian first touched, and became a small piece. After a while, the blue light became lighter and finally disappeared, and the faint red light on Xianxian's body also began to slowly fade. At this time, Xianxian's whole body was sweating like rain, and his clothes were all soaked. His rapid breathing exposed the hardships he had just paid. No one knew how much pressure Xianxian had just faced and how hard he had worked. The Lord of Chunyang Palace, who had his eyes closed tightly, finally opened his eyes again. A mysterious smile appeared on his face. He seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be letting the people serving him hear him. He said, A third-level Qi refinement cultivator can actually take my rhino spirit finger and can even use magic treasures. Interesting. After saying this, the Lord of Chunyang Palace suddenly raised his voice. His voice directly penetrated the room and resounded in the ears of everyone in 9 Earth Mountain Villa. Xianxian, you have cleaned up my Chunyang Palace. This is a great merit. I allow you to make a request that is not too excessive as a reward. The group of people outside were stunned where the attack came from. The words of the Pure Yang Palace Master suddenly caused a sensation in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa. Chapter 106. As the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, a master at the Yuanying stage, in terms of seniority alone, he was even 1 generation higher than the several Palace Masters of Chunyang Palace. Chu Heng and Du Qian, the inner mountain disciples at the Foundation Establishment stage, also had to address him as Grandmaster. Even if they were already official disciples of the inner mountain, it was still an extravagant hope to meet the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace. Except for some major festivals and major events, these disciples had no chance to meet the Palace Master at all. With the identity of the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, it was already a great thing for him to pay attention to the sect competition of the Outer Mountain disciples, not to mention that he came in person. The 9 Earth Mountain Villa could simply be described as being honored. But now, the Palace Master actually made a request that was not too excessive. How could it not be surprising? This Xianxian was really a dog shit luck. Everyone had the same thought in their minds. The request made by the Palace Master, even if he had already said that it was not too excessive, still made countless people start to go crazy. Putting aside the identity of the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, in terms of cultivation, he was a master at the Yuanying stage. Whether it was cultivation methods, elixirs, magic treasures, or even the identity of a pro-disciple, it was not too excessive to ask for. This time, Xianxian could be said to have reached the sky in a single bound. Some people were jealous, some people were emotional, but more people saw the performance of Xianxian just now. Du Qian, Chu Heng, and the other disciples of the inner mountain were obviously the latter. The telepathic finger of the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace was almost the Palace Master's signature method, which he could use at will. Although it was an understatement, Du Qian, Chu Heng, and the others thought that if it were them, they would not be able to catch it so easily. But Xianxian, who was at the 3rd level of Qi refining, was so easy to catch it under the premise that he was a big realm lower than them. As long as one thought about the meaning behind this, the Palace Master's action of personally summoning Xianxian was not so shocking. Everyone looked at Xianxian enviously. As long as Xianxian said the word, cultivation techniques, medicinal pills, magic treasures, treasures of heaven and earth, arrays, and even raising one's cultivation, all of it would only take a word from him. Everyone secretly wondered what they would choose if they were in his shoes and faced with such an opportunity. Of course, he was more curious about what Xianxian would choose. Disciple Xianxian requests Palace Master to allow disciple to go to Immortal Falling Abyss. Of course, Xianxian also heard the Palace Master's voice. Almost as soon as the Palace Master spoke, Xianxian unceremoniously stated his request. As soon as Xianxian's words came out, it caused another uproar. No magic treasures, no cultivation techniques, no other treasures, just a trip to the Immortal Fallen Abyss? Most of the people in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa had never even heard of this name. Everyone's first impression was that the Immortal Fallen Abyss was some sort of treasure that made Xianxian care so much that he didn't hesitate to ask for the Palace Master's permission. Those who knew about the Immortal Fallen Abyss all sucked in a breath of cold air. The Immortal Fallen Abyss was not a good place just from its name. It was really surprising that Xianxian wanted to go there. Even the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace couldn't help but frown when he heard Xianxian's request. The other Foundation Establishment disciples were in disbelief, but they didn't dare to make a sound as they stood beside the Palace Master. The Palace Master was indeed the Palace Master. He quickly recovered from his shock and smiled. Since you can take one of my fingers, you have the qualifications to go to the Immortal Fallen Abyss. Fine, I'll make an exception and allow it. With a flip of his hand, A small white jade token appeared in his hand, and he threw it out. The token seemed to be carried by an invisible hand, and it slowly flew out of the room and floated towards Xianxian on the martial arts practice field. "Go if you're ready." Xianxian had just reached out to catch the white jade token when he heard the palace master's voice. He hastily replied, "Yes." The rest of the competition wasn't too exciting. The only thing that stood out was Gong Sunling. With her 7th layer Qi condensation strength, she consecutively challenged 3 8th layer Qi condensation and 2 9th layer Qi condensation senior brothers. She won all of them, causing people to praise her outstanding talent. After the palace master gave Xianxian the token, he didn't say anything else. It wasn't until the end of the competition that he praised Gong Sunling a bit before leaving. With the palace master's departure, the 9 Earth Mountain villa that had been tense for 2 days suddenly relaxed. There was nothing that could be done. When the palace master was here, even Chu Heng didn't dare to breathe loudly, let alone the others. The only one who had a flat performance might be Xianxian alone. After relaxing, people began to inquire about what kind of place the Immortal Fallen Abyss was and why Xianxian had requested to go there. However, the news that they heard shocked everyone. The Immortal Fallen Abyss was a place for the large sects foundation establishment disciples to hone their strength. At the same time, it was the only exit for the underground spirit beasts. It was a place for cultivation, a hub to suppress the underground spirit beasts, and also a place to obtain spirit marrow. The underground spirit beasts were related to the safety of the world. At the same time, the spirit marrow was related to the various sects' spirit veins. Therefore, the Immortal Fallen Abyss was an extremely important place. Every sect even sent at least one nascent soul expert to oversee it. The underground spirit beasts were enormous and they were born from the heavens and earth. They didn't have any intelligence and acted purely on instinct. No matter what was blocking their way, the huge underground spirit beasts would always swarm over and destroy it. The 2 words, Immortal Fallen Abyss, were a warning. The Immortal Fallen Abyss was a famous ominous place in the cultivation world. This was why everyone was shocked. To go to the Immortal Fallen Abyss, one had to be at least at the mid-foundation establishment stage. Otherwise, the sect wouldn't even give out a token. Without a token, one couldn't even touch the door to the Immortal Fallen Abyss, let alone enter. But Xianxian had actually asked the palace master to allow him to enter the Immortal Fallen Abyss when he was only at the 3rd level of Qi refining. Even if he defeated and killed Sun Haijing, in the end, Sun Haijing was only at the peak of Qi refining, infinitely close to the early foundation establishment stage. His true strength hadn't reached that level yet. Was he planning to throw away his life? The only outer sect disciple who wasn't surprised by Xianxian's decision was Gong Sunling. After the competition, Gong Sunling directly went to find Xianxian. While reminding him to be careful, she didn't forget to issue a challenge to Xianxian. "Junior brother Yang, you're ahead of me in the Immortal Fallen Abyss. Watch how I catch up." Xianxian was very happy that Gong Sunling issued this challenge. This has meant that Gong Sunling was no longer the madman who blindly immersed herself in cultivation and didn't listen to the outside world. Now she has become more active. "Okay." Xianxian agreed to Gong Sunling's challenge. "I'll wait for you in the Immortal Fallen Abyss." Chapter 107. You really want to go to the Immortal Falling Abyss? The one who asked this question was Du Qian, who had always taken good care of Xianxian. He didn't understand. Xianxian was only a Qi condensation disciple. If he couldn't even use his flying sword, how many times could he block the attacks of the underground spirit beasts? Such an unwise action didn't seem like something Xianxian would do. Of course. Xianxian smiled and made an inviting gesture, inviting Du Qian to sit across from him. At the same time, he smiled and said, "I asked for the Palace Lord's grace. I can't go back on my word, can I? Do you know how dangerous the Immortal Falling Abyss is?" Although Du Qian was already a disciple of the Law Enforcement Hall and was at the peak of Foundation establishment, he still hadn't gone to the Immortal Falling Abyss even once. Not everyone liked to go to such a dangerous place to hone their skills. "Martial uncle, I can even memorize the 9 Earth Mountain Villas scripture pavilion. Do you think I should go? Du Qian was definitely concerned about him. Yang Chen was very grateful, so he was very respectful to Du Qian. He quickly replied, "In any case, the palace lord said to go when I'm ready. I think it won't be too late to go when I'm ready. I just need to grab this qualification first." Yang Chen's words put Du Qian's worried heart at ease. So this was Yang Chen's plan. This was a good move. One had to know that although the immortal falling abyss was dangerous, it was rich in resources. As long as one trained for a few years and didn't die, they would basically become a small millionaire. Therefore, the qualification to enter the immortal falling abyss was something that everyone fought over. Yang Chen was still at the qi condensation stage, yet he was able to occupy one. That's fine. Grab this qualification first, and then slowly go after you reach foundation establishment. Du Qian nodded and said these words with appreciation. Then, he saw that Yang Chen's expression was strange. His heart was shocked and he hurriedly asked, "You are not going to go before building your foundation, right?" "In fact, Martial Uncle, I plan to go in 2 months." Yang Chen didn't hide anything from Du Qian. He smiled and said his plan, completely ignoring Du Qian's dumbfounded expression. "With your current cultivation, even if you go, you won't be able to pass the newcomer assessment. What's the use?" Du Qian really did not know what to say. He could only put away the smile on his face and asked seriously, "You might not even be able to resist the lowest-ranked underground spirit beast. Are you going to court death?" "Not necessarily. Martial Uncle, don't forget that I still have the ability to concoct pills." Yang Chen also did not completely reveal his plans. He only said the most comforting words to Du Qian. "In the immortal falling abyss, I believe there are still many people who like the second turn qi nourishing pill. As long as I have enough medicinal ingredients, I can exchange it for many benefits." Second turn qi nurturing pill? When Du Qian heard this term, he stood up in shock. "You can refine the second cycle qi nourishing pill? You are a second-grade alchemist?" Du Qian couldn't help but be shocked. Even most of the alchemists at the peak of the foundation establishment stage couldn't refine a second-turn pill. Yang Chen, a small qi refinement stage disciple, could already refine a second-turn pill. If this news were to spread, it was unknown how many alchemists would go crazy. A turn meant that one could refine the pill once. A second-grade alchemist meant that one could refine the pill twice, and the effect was almost doubled. The most powerful alchemists, such as Taishang Laojun, could refine the 9-turn golden pill. Generally speaking, the 9-turn also meant the limit of the pill. Every increase in level meant that the level of alchemy would improve a lot. Unfortunately, such an improvement was not so easy. Even if Yang Chen was a great principal golden immortal in his previous life, when he died, he was just a 6th-grade alchemist. From this, it could be seen that high-level alchemists were rare. In this life, Zhu Chintao was already the hall master of the medicinal hall, but he was just a 3rd-grade alchemist, and he had just entered this realm. But this was already an achievement that people looked up to. It was not known how many people were praising Zhu Chintao's talent in alchemy. It was simply a genius. But now, Du Qian had to admit that in the matter of alchemy, Zhu Chintao seemed to be a hopeless mediocre person in front of Yang Chen. Of course, Du Qian would never dare to say this. He was just too shocked and even forgot to give Zhu Chintao some face in his own heart. The 2nd-grade medicinal pill, especially the qi-nourishing pill, did not require Yang Chen to spend much energy. With the help of the profound spirit furnace, Yang Chen could complete it relatively easily. If he was not afraid that the 3rd-grade medicinal pill would shock the world, Yang Chen would have already started refining it. Naturally, the 2nd-grade alchemist, this was the perfect cover for Yang Chen now. In Chunyang Palace, perhaps there was a genius title of climbing the heaven ladder that could make him temporarily unaffected by the outside world, but outside, the title of the 2nd-grade alchemist was definitely much more dazzling than any cultivation genius, and it was safer. The masters may be happy to strangle the cultivation geniuses of other sects, but they would never be willing to easily offend any alchemist, even if he was only the most ordinary 1st-grade alchemist. Du Qian left in a hurry almost at the moment of confirmation. He wanted to report this shocking news to the senior members of his sect immediately. At the same time, he was very grateful that Xianxian only said this to him alone. This was clearly a big gift from Xianxian to him. Among the 9 Earth Villa and Yixiu Villa, Du Qian was famous for taking care of Xianxian and even did not hesitate to fight against Chu Heng, who was a disciple, which made several high-level members of Chunyang Palace very dissatisfied. It wasn't until Xianxian made the qi-seeking pill that the high-level members saw the value of Xianxian. Now that Xianxian had become a second-grade alchemist, then everything that Du Qian had done before would immediately be upgraded to the great height of a discerning eye to protect the sect, and the benefits would definitely be great. In his own small courtyard, Xianxian pointed out Shenda's 4 people and just sat down to take out the profound spirit furnace to maintain it. He saw that on the top of Meiqing Mountain, a few rays of light rose and quickly flew towards this side. With a slight smile on his face, Xianxian put away the profound spirit furnace and then walked over, watching the few rays of light and waiting quietly. After a while, a few rays of light appeared over the 9 Earth Villa, but it was a few sword lights. As soon as the sword lights fell, there were a few more figures in Xianxian's small courtyard. Before Xianxian could see who was there, Zhu Chintao's voice came to his ears. Xianxian, can you refine the second-grade qi cultivating pill? Yes, Master Ancestor. Xianxian hurriedly bowed and replied, then got up slightly. Only then did he discover that in addition to Du Qian and Zhu Chintao, the master of the medicine hall, the master of Chunyang Palace also appeared in his small courtyard. Chapter 108. Zhu Chintao's temper was very impatient. When he heard Xianxian's answer, he directly took out a lot of medicinal materials from the Qingkuan bag and piled them in the courtyard. He eagerly ordered, "Refine it for me to see." In his voice, it was full of expectation and surprise. It seemed that he had never doubted that Xianxian would lie. After such a long time, Zhu Chintao's aura seemed to be stronger. Although Xianxian couldn't judge Zhu Chintao's current realm, he also knew that he must have improved. This was Xianxian's fire-controlling technique, which made him have a further understanding, so that there would be such a realm improvement. Although the master of Chunyang Palace did not speak, his eyes were also looking forward to it, and there was a deep appreciation. Xianxian, the outer sect disciple, brought him too many surprises. In addition to the medicine hall master and the master of Chunyang Palace, Xianxian also saw an acquaintance, Su Qingxin, the foreign affairs hall master of Chunyang Palace. Seeing Xianxian looking over, Su Qingxin also smiled and nodded. He seemed to be very happy. Although the prepared medicinal materials were not as good as Xianxian's Millennium Profound Yang fruit, they were also needed for ordinary qi replenishing pills. Xianxian was not pretentious. He took out the profound spirit furnace from the Qingkuan bag and restored it to its ordinary size. He placed it in the yard and planned to refine it on the spot. Anyway, there was the master of Chunyang Palace watching. Xianxian did not have to worry about any accidents happening. Seeing Xianxian's profound spirit furnace, the eyes of the master of Chunyang Palace and Zhu Chintao lit up. The palace master was finally completely sure that Xianxian now had the strength to control and sacrificial refine the magic weapon. This profound spirit furnace was clearly a magic weapon that had been sacrificial refined, and it was also personally sacrificial refined by Xianxian. Otherwise, it would not be so compatible with Xianxian. The profound spirit furnace itself was given to Xianxian by Zhu Chintao. At that time, Zhu Chintao certainly knew what the profound spirit furnace looked like. Now that the profound spirit furnace had obviously improved some quality, Zhu Chintao certainly found it at a glance. With regards to Xianxian's changes in just over a year, Zhu Chintao felt that he had aged too much. The nourishing qi pill was a very low-level medicinal pill. Usually, it was a first-grade nourishing qi pill, which was suitable for the disciples in the qi refining stage. Moreover, it was very easy to refine. Even Xianxian's untalented servant Helian could refine it a long time ago. Foundation establishment experts simply wouldn't be interested in this kind of low-level medicinal pill. However, the second-grade qi nourishing dan was completely different. After further refinement, The qi-nourishing dan was not inferior to the Peiyuan dan used by Foundation establishment experts. In terms of cost and efficacy, it was far superior to the Foundation pill. Under the gaze of the Chunyang Palace Master and the two hall masters, Xianxian easily put a large pile of medicinal materials into the profound spirit furnace after treatment and began to refine. Xianxian didn't count his previous life. In this life, he had refined it dozens of times. The experience of the two lives was familiar. The people next to him only saw that Xianxian was holding the profound spirit furnace in one hand, controlling the heat, and the other hand was skillfully adding and processing the medicinal materials. He was calm and had a well-thought-out look in his chest, and they all nodded in their hearts. Xianxian's brilliant fire control method also appeared in the eyes of the Chunyang Palace Master for the first time. Zhu Chintao and Su Qingxin had already seen Xianxian's fire control technique, so they were not surprised, but the Chunyang Palace Master looked serious, and they didn't know what he was thinking about. In less than an hour, Xianxian completed the refining of ordinary qi-nourishing dan. The medicinal materials prepared by Zhu Chintao were just enough for him to refine a batch of qi-nourishing dan. After skillfully pulling out hundreds of qi-nourishing dan from the profound spirit furnace, Xianxian cleaned up the dregs in the profound spirit furnace and put the qi-nourishing dan that had been successfully refined into the profound spirit furnace. This time, Xianxian did not add any more medicinal materials, but held the two handles of the profound spirit furnace in both hands and began to control the fire with full concentration, slowly refining the first-grade qi-nourishing dan. Refining medicine was definitely a meticulous work that could not be more meticulous. As long as there was a little carelessness, the powerful fire would burn the medicinal pill to ashes. Xianxian showed unprecedented concentration. The people watching from the side knew the importance of this moment, and all of them held their breath, for fear of disturbing Xianxian a little. After all, Xianxian was only a disciple of the qi refining stage. Now he was completing something that the cultivation of the foundation stage may not be able to do, so naturally he had to be careful. This refinement took Xianxian a full 8 hours. All the people present were cultivators, and no one moved much. They accompanied Xianxian's refining throughout the process. The extremely thin flame rolled over the surface of the medicinal pill flexibly. In addition to sending a burst of spiritual power, it also brought out a trace of more subtle dregs. After 8 hours, this process was all over. At the last moment, Xianxian still used the most common dan pulling technique to pull out all the refined qi-nourishing dan and put them into the jade bottle that had been prepared for a long time. When all the processes were over, Zhu Chintao couldn't wait to grab the jade bottle in Xianxian's hand and ejected a medicinal pill to the master of Chunyang Palace and Su Qingxin. He picked up one in his hand and put it in front of his eyes. After the second-grade refining, the qi-nourishing dan had shrunk a little, but it looked abnormally round, and there was a comfortable touch in his hand. On the surface of the medicinal pill, two thin lines completely surrounded the medicinal pill and formed two circles. They were slender but clear and could be seen clearly. On the surface of the medicinal pill, the fragrance of the medicinal pill had disappeared a lot, and there was a kind of restrained posture. Zhu Chintao's method of testing the medicinal pill had always been to throw it directly into the mouth. After eating a second-grade qi-nourishing dan, Zhu Chintao closed his eyes and began to feel the medicinal power carefully. The master of Chunyang Palace and Su Qingxin also stopped observing and looked at Zhu Chintao, waiting for his judgment. The spiritual power is abundant, and the momentum is also urgent. Yes, this is the second-grade qi-nourishing dan. After a while, Zhu Chintao opened his eyes and said these words. The master of Chunyang Palace and Su Qingxin, who were waiting for the result, suddenly showed joy on their faces. Xianxian, what other medicinal pills can you refine? After the surprise, the master of Chunyang Palace asked aloud. Only qi-seeking dan and qi-nourishing dan. Xianxian's face immediately showed embarrassment. As for the other medicinal pills, I have only seen the prescription, but I have not tried them. So, you learned your spiritual power and medicinal pills in the Sutras depository, and no one taught you? The master of Chunyang Palace nodded non-committally and continued to ask. Yes, Palace Master. Xianxian nodded and replied. This was almost an open secret of Yi Xiu Villa and Nine Earth Villa, and there was nothing to hide. Moreover, Xianxian did not think of pretending to ask Chu Heng for advice. You can go to the immortal falling abyss with peace of mind. Remember to exchange for more spiritual marrow, which will be of great benefit to your cave residence in the future. There was no expression on the face of the master of Chunyang Palace, and his tone was very calm, but the last sentence somewhat revealed his mood. From now on, if someone talks about your identity as an executioner, kill him directly. If you can't kill him, come back and tell the law enforcement hall, and use the power of Chunyang Palace to kill him. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.